All right, welcome everybody. I am Paddo. With me is L-Man Beastio, and Ming is the king today to break down patch 0.42.0. And it's been a long time we've been away, but luckily we come back to a bunch of huge changes in here. You see some nice new UI design here for the challenges, and a lot of actual card changes which we haven't seen in a while. Now, the trick with these card changes will be that you will be able to get your resources back for these and be able to get to recraft and rejigger. So if some of your cards got nerfed, you'll be able to some new ones. There'll be also be some cards to get buffed here. So let's just hop in and see these changes that we have in store for us. So first up to the plate is going to be Vitruvian. We have Staff of Venthyr, which we got the cost lowered from 3 to 2, attack lowered from +3 to +2, so not going to be quite strong. And then Wildfire Ankh, cost raised from 2 to 3. Ming is the king. Tell us, what do these changes mean for Vitruvian, especially these artifact heavy ones?
Well, I was under the impression that these changes, I feel like they're there for new players. I mean, one of the most frustrating things someone who's in their first week of the game experiences is to be paired up against Vitruvian and they go turn 1 Ankh, turn 2 Yakir, and you've taken 7 damage and potentially lost a minion before you've been able to do anything. So I think by swapping the costs, they can still do that 5 mana move, but it's no longer as punishing for new people who haven't necessarily learned how to play against artifacts that give range. The second thing about it is generally +2 attack for 2, in my opinion, is better than +3 attack for 3, except that now a buffed Ankh no longer kills things like Silver Guard and Veteran Silith. So I would say that's a pretty meaningful change. It probably doesn't change the game that much just because Vitruvian has so many random little pieces of damage. So yeah, I think it's mostly I would call this more of a quality of life change than a power change.
Yeah, I definitely would go there. I think that a lot of the openings that you would kind of see also too from Vitruvian, now, they can still on on the turn 2 basically play a Wildfire Ankh, and or if they're on the right side, they can start Wildfire Ankh and blast them if they really want to. But before, like the early play of just like step forward, Ankh you, then like have an answer, don't, or potentially like have to play around blast from go, is no longer there. So that'll actually change a little bit of their openings and kind of make it a little bit interesting for their like early game starts, since they have a few. Usually you're going to see a blast mini or whatever, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these changes work for them. But I agree, it's kind of a like +2 attack for 2 is still actually pretty decent for them, and it's still good with an Ankh. 4 damage blast is still a thing that's pretty good. It's a scarab basically on your general, blasting people away. So interesting to see how that works out. But now switching over to Magmar. Magmar Adamantite Claws also getting the artifact treatment, going to go from 6 attack down to 4 attack. Element Beastio, what do you think about this change?
I'm I'm gonna kind of borrow from Ming here because it does feel like a new player change as well for this one. But as opposed to the Ankh change where it's an epic, right? So this claw change affects Gauntlet more because it's a basic card, and I feel like claws at the new player level and at the Gauntlet level are like super strong. They're manageable sometimes, and they're not like you might not even see claws sometimes at the high end of the game, but claws actually like just kind of killed everything. Like there's like 5 or 6 minions. There's a very small amount of minions in the game that survive claws. So if claws isn't one-shotting your next 3 minions, then it's just doing 24 damage to face if it actually gets to connect all 3 times. And then there's been a lot of frustration for players where double claws just kind of annihilates you because you take 14 out of nowhere. And yeah, you can kite it. You can like rush us, rust crawler, ping it, throws weakling like Sarlax at it. There's ways to get rid of it, but at the different formats, like Gauntlet and new players, it just it's really strong. So I can see why the change happened. Still
Yeah,
does 12 damage, right? So
Yeah, it's kind of swapping power with basically Snowpiercer, which we'll get into in a bit. But yeah, like six attack is still pretty good. But yeah, I think that I just feel like as a player, like especially in the if I was a new player, like just seeing someone the general just be like boom, you like take 8, especially if you don't have a really like any real board to respond with, and you're gonna have to basically run from the claws the next turn, and they might be able to run you down if the second hit connects. It doesn't feel very fair. So.
Also,
This
sorry, real
will
quick.
change it a bit. Yeah, hit.
The Iridium Claws combo is sadly a little bit nerfed, which I kind of have a soft spot for it, but it's a cool combo, so yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like no one expects the general to be the Macintor War Beast. So moving on to Venthyr changes, which we alluded to a little bit there. Snowpiercer getting a bit of a change here, going from +4 attack to +3 attack. Cryogenesis getting its cost lowered to 3, so now it's actually going to be a little bit more effective there. And Snow Chaser getting changed to a Vesper unit, and you might be like, what is a Vesper unit? Well, Frost actually as a keyword is going away, and that's going to be replaced with Vesper, which is kind of cool because now it actually gives them a lot more room to kind of go free with that design space because Frost is like ice stuff, and we already had a lot of ice stuff. So yeah. So what does this mean for Elman? I'm gonna hit you back since we had the clause and it was short. What do you think these changes mean for you with Venthyr?
So 2 of them are basically straight bust, right? Like there's no drawback for gaining Vesper, and there's no drawback for lowering your cost, right? At least for now. So I'll start with the Chaser. Well, I guess they go together, right? Because the Cryogenesis can now get Chaser because he gained the new keyword, right? But so basically they're buffing what used to be Frost, and they're buffing Infiltrate at the same time with the Chaser change. And Chaser's kind of a staple as it is, so it's like a perfect spot to buff them in. And since you can get Cryogenesis has been useful for getting things like Glacial Elemental and stuff, but now Chaser can be replayed over and over to proc Elemental, which that interaction didn't used to exist, right? He wasn't a Frost before. So Cryogenesis is just straight up better because it's cheaper. Chaser is better because it's gonna help Glacial Elemental now. The card draw issues that Banner might have had, they're lessened by the Cryogenesis change. And then now people might actually get to play with the with having like one-offs in their deck, like 1 Ancient Grove, like 1 Dragar Lord, things like that. So people actually get to experiment a lot more with this Cryogenesis change. Before people tried it, but Cryogenesis just wasn't up to snuff with the 4 for 4. So those are just straight buffs and deck changing buffs. So people should experiment a lot with these. And then Snowpiercer goes basically to pre-changed Yakir, right? So it does exactly what Yakir used to do in Vitruvius, except for the blast combo. But it kills the same range of creatures that Yakir did when it was in blast, right? So it does kill the Silver Guard and the Veteran Leiter. It does get to that range. Does lower their burst a little bit because double Snowpiercer was like a game-ending strategy for a lot of people, just doing 10 damage from hand. With the from hand, that's like their burst. So mostly buffs, I would say, except obviously the Snowpiercer, a little toned down. Sort of the same explanation as the Magma thing, where it's strong in draft and it's strong at their levels. It's actually pretty decent at the high levels too, because it's a finisher for a lot of banner decks. So
to sort of echo what Elman was saying, a large portion of Vantyr's gameplay, even though Venthyr has some of the best spot removal in the game, involved minion trades. So gas was always an issue for Venthyr, right? Like you can always throw someone out with your foxes and your hailstone prisons, but over time you would get fewer and fewer cards and you'd run out of steam. And Venthyr leaned very heavily on getting good snow chasers to maintain their hand size. But now with Cryogenesis, the aggro deck can basically guarantee that they'll always have snow chasers or whatever they want. And then you also have that like really cool mid-range control engine of elemental snow chaser plus Voice of the Wind, so you can get that going, and so it gives Vanar some really good uh, roll reach and gas aggro. And then as far as Snowpiercer goes, I mean all the other basic artifacts went down, so it's not quite a nerf um, in the relative sense. The biggest difference is that if you're up against an obelisk deck, you can't go Snowpiercer, kill their obelisk, and then play something else on the side.
Yeah, or kill that pesky silhouette tracer who's a jerk and help your opponent escape. Can't get that guy. But yeah, that basically I think covers Vanar pretty good. I mean, definitely interesting changes there. And expect to see a lot more Snow Chaser and Cryogenesis play from Vanar players as we go forward. And now the big one that everybody's waiting for. Where are all the Songhai nerfs going to be? Surely something got nerfed there. And the one for this patch is going to be Heaven's Eclipse, getting its cost raised from 3 to 4. Ming, I guess I'll throw you this way. How does this affect Songhai now with this little bump? Because it's just one more cost. Technically, they can still Heaven's Eclipse. They can still go off the same as normal. Like if you have a Mana Forger, it still costs the old cost of 3. How big of a change is this making it one cost more?
Well, first of all, right in the feelings. but I think Heaven's Eclipse always needed a change, and what putting it at 4 mana does is it prevents people from randomly using it, on turn 1, turn 2, to sort of pre-gas their hand, and then play the game normally, and just sort of, I happen to be ahead a few cards, and then kill you with what appears to be amazingly lucky draws. It prevents sort of incidental, thoughtless use of the card, if that makes any sense. At 4 now, anytime you use it, it's a deliberate choice. Songhai traditionally has always been card gated rather than mana gated, as in they're more concerned about keeping their hand full than they are about how much mana they have. But with Heaven's Eclipse at 4, now Songhai has to worry about both a little bit. So that should put a nice dent in it, because the issue that Songhai was running into for players of all kinds is that you would have games where Songhai is the most difficult deck to play because there's so many decisions, so many factors to think about. Like when you draw, you would replace it, mid-turn to sort of get different things. You'd search for lethal, and then you'd have other games where Songhai is just the dumbest, easiest deck to play, and it would be the same deck, and it's just sort of the sequence of everything. And a cheap Heavens contributes to that because it just sort of appears. A more expensive Heavens means every time you cast it, you are consciously thinking about it. So that when your opponent sees you casting Heavens, they know that you're setting up for something.
I think it also changes the double Heavens, because with a typical, like if you put out a Mana Forger and started a combo, it was a lot easier to combo them at 2 with everything being free. But now that it costs about 6 mana in a turn to have played the 2 Heavens, it actually changes that combo a lot as far as like what you might see. I mean, it can still come out if everything else you're drawing is 0, but it definitely makes it not as easy as before, where you're like, okay, yeah, like I play 2 Heavens Eclipse for 4, I still have like 4 core left, or like 3 core left, which is still a lot to deal with at that point.
Right, and with Vortex, it was 1.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely going to be a big change, and interested to see those decks and how they're played. So I think it's actually a really good analysis of it, and I hope to see a little bit more of it on the see how like the the Pinghai and Minghai decks do now with that change, is that it'll make it a little bit more interesting instead of just, all right, have Heaven's Eclipse, use it, get gas. But then we have some of the biggest changes, and we can all just tackle these together, as Leiter actually gets quite a new coat of paint here. Excuse me.
Yeah, Leiter gets 2 cards completely redesigned and a buff to Martyrdom.
Yes, so Light Chaser stats is going to be bumped to a 3/2, and now it actually gains +1/+1 for every time whenever a minion or general is healed. So it can actually become pretty big pretty quickly. and with that little bit of buff, makes it a pretty good aggro minion. Martyrdom going from 3 to 2, obviously that cost decrease going to be great there, as it already was like one of the best early game removals in the game. Sunriser, this card goes from the 4/9 big buff Zeal unit now to a 3/4 that whenever a minion or general is healed, it deals 2 damage to all nearby enemies, which is quite a big shift for it, and its cost is lowered from 6 to 4. So gonna hand this one over to you guys. What does this mean for Lionar? Now that these cards are taken out, some cards that actually I probably didn't see it too much of. Like maybe a Sunriser would come out late against me, like maybe like a Light Chasers and an Overzealous healing Lionar deck. But now these cards have very different functionalities and very unique kind of they're almost like faction keywords more for like the faction. Like what does this change about Lionar?
Well, the first thing I'd like to draw everyone's attention to is that these things trigger even when your opponent heals. So what that really means is when you're playing against Lionar, oftentimes it's a math game, right? Like I dealt 3 to you and healed 2 with my healing mystic, and then you tempest everyone to kill my healing mystic to deal 3 to me, and then you played a potion, so we're like pretty even. But now that Lionar has these cards, when you do that stuff, Lionar just punishes you for it. So that's the first thing I'll call attention to.
My first thing immediately was looking at Light Chaser, and basically the 3/2 2-drop stat line, the 2-drop 3/2 stat line is always kind of looked down upon. But if this guy heals exactly once, at least once, he survives a general's attack. So, and he basically matches a win rate at it. If he heals any more than that, or if anyone in the game heals more than that, then yeah, he can get out of control kind of easily. The other thing is, I already thought Martyrdom was kind of good at 3. So at 2, it seems like just like awesome. Like I don't even have any other word for it. Yeah, those 2 things are like the immediate things. And then I feel like Sunriser is the huge change here, because every time you ping general, you hurt artifacts, right? And it's a bunch of small package of pings, right? Like sort of like a Shadow Dancer. So Sunriser might just kind of dunk on artifacts really, really easily. And Holy Immolation already hits generals, and Tempest already hits generals. So Sunriser is kind of like Lionar will never have trouble against artifacts, I think, ever again. So
yeah, I'd like to also mention that Martyrdom heals, Holy Immolation heals. What else? What's that 3/6?
Sun drop clearly. The 3/6 is Suntide Maiden.
Yeah, Suntide Maiden, when that thing triggers, that also triggers a heal.
Emerald Rejuvenator.
Yep, Healing Mystic, Rejuvenator. Whenever, if there's a Sunriser or a Light Chaser in play and you're using Shadow Dancer or Four Winds, that triggers it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole bevy of things that are out there, and I mean, our list is by no means comprehensive. We're just pointing out some of the stranger.
You go to a collection
ones.
Type heal and find out, well, like I don't know, 10, 12 cards that will heal, maybe more. So definitely a lot.
So imagine dropping a Sunriser next to their guys, and then martyrdoming something.
I guess people hopefully won't complain about martyrdom anymore, because you can't really make it any better.
Yeah.
Like you could, but it might be a little out of hand.
Yeah. So I don't know, and then Tempest is super legitimate because it damages your own general, giving you things to heal, right?
Yeah.
But do you think this also changes like cards like Emerald Rejuvenator and cards like that might have been more common that people were commonly playing? Now it actually might be a detriment to you to play those cards against Lionar decks?
Absolutely.
Yes. Which is one of the... I kind of hope that they I don't know. We have to test this, right? Like, see if like healing counting anywhere is gonna be like super bad because the mirror matches will be interesting, like Chasers and Sunrisers versus like Chasers and Sunrisers. And like Ming said, 4 Winds and Shadow Dancers in other decks too. But even just neutrals, like Emerald Rejuvenator, which people typically run to like stop rush decks, might get punished. Hopefully it's not too much, right? Or it doesn't make people not run heals, which then makes you weak against other decks. That'd be very interesting.
Yeah, and it means that when we ever get to a tournament format that isn't infinite sideboard, people will have to make a choice, right? Are they more afraid of Lionar, or are they more afraid of Songhai? You know, are they more afraid of a Venthyr? You know, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so any, a lot of card changes coming in here. Any like final thoughts on like what you think is like think about this patch? Like are we gonna see like a huge surge in Lionar and Venthyr players? What do you expect to see on the ladder? Like any final thoughts like that stuff?
So if I may say the Starlight Vorpal River change.
Oh
that
yes,
we need to
throw
cover.
that in there.
So they won't respawn where. So Sarlacc won't respawn where he died at, and Vorpal won't spawn his Wraithlings where he died, which means that the consuming rebirth tricks are safer to do, and you just before if you sacrifice your Vorpal and the Wraithling spawn where you rebirth him, you kind of automatically threw the game right there by your own hand, and it just didn't feel good. It was a pretty low chance for it to happen, but when it happened, it was like feels bad, man. So now
pay to kill your own 6.
yeah, and thankfully that's not really like a fix, right? It's just more like a quality of life. So like, I'm glad they changed that. It's like a small side, like a small buff to Abyss, basically, since they don't actually get any patch notes other than that in this patch. Yeah.
Abyssian's pretty strong right now.
Hey man, I'm okay with more buffs. I'm never complain about that.
It's not a buff, it's a bug fix, man. Jeez.
A bug fix.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when Songhai got bug fixed, Gorehorn got nerfed. So.
Sort of, yeah. And I think the biggest changes here, like, so the biggest actual change, I think, is the Heavens change, because Songhai kind of shuts down other decks from being viable, right? Like, if you're gonna die in 3 turns, then that's not a viable deck, right? So slowing Songhai down might open the field for everyone. The liner changes are just like a new archetype kind of thing, so they're just like fun to like find out and see how they pan out. So I feel they make the faction more interesting, and I always look forward to Banner Boss, so I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, I agree with that. Lionar opens new decks, slows Songhai, and to a lesser extent Magmar with the claws down. Changes the Vitruvian turn 1. So all of those improve the overall ladder environment without shifting power too much. And then Venthyr just got a buff that they needed.
Oh, one more thing I wanted to say. I'm sorry, Osirisk. You kind of got slightly nerfed. Hopefully you'll see better days later on. Yeah.
Poor guy. All right, guys. Well, again, thank you as always for joining us for the Duelyst patch rundown for patch point 42. Thanks again to Element Beastio and Ming is the King, and we'll see you guys next week.
All right, thanks, Paddo.
Yeah.